My name is Daniel Carter. I've spent my life solving problems, not just for myself, but for CEOs, corporations, even foreign governments. I fix what's broken. I see through lies. But nothing prepared me for the betrayal that came from the one person I thought I knew best, my wife. It all started at a birthday dinner. One note, one dance, one look too long. And suddenly, the life I'd built for over a decade began to crack. What I discovered that night changed everything, not just about her, but about me. Let me take you back to where it all began. It was supposed to be a simple night, a celebration, just good food, familiar faces, and a few drinks to mark the birthday of an old friend. The restaurant was lively, waiters weaving through crowded tables, laughter rising and falling like waves, and the low hum of a jazz band warming up in the corner. It was the kind of place that made you forget about everything else for a while. But I couldn't relax. Something was off. I sat at the far end of the long table, watching Elena, my wife of 12 years, as she chatted with the other guests. Her laughter was louder than usual. Her smile lingered just a little too long when she looked across the room. And then there was him, Luke Taylor. He wasn't part of our group, but everyone knew who he was. Local celebrity, retired pro athlete, still charming as ever, tall, polished, magnetic in that arrogant, too perfect way. The kind of man other men instinctively distrust. And I had every reason to. I was just sipping my coffee, trying to tune out the noise, when a server leaned in close and, without a word, slipped me a folded note. No name, no expression, just placed it beside my plate and moved on. I opened it slowly, not knowing what to expect. But what I read hit me like a cold slap to the face. Watch Luke Taylor. He's targeting your wife. That was it. No signature. No explanation. Just that one line. I reread it 3 times. My mind raced. Was this a prank? A joke? Some jealous ex-fan of his trying to stir up drama? But then I looked up and saw her. Elena. Dancing. With Luke. They moved with an ease that made my stomach tighten. She was laughing, tilting her head in that flirty way she used to do back when we were dating. His hand rested too low on her back. And when the song ended, they didn't return to the table. They slipped away, disappearing into the crowd, behind a column near the back bar. I sat frozen. My instincts screamed at me to get up, to follow them, to demand an explanation. But I didn't want to cause a scene. Not yet. I needed to be sure. Needed evidence, not just suspicion. Then, just as suddenly, the music stopped. The crowd shifted. And there they were, emerging from the shadows, side by side. Elena looked flustered. Luke smiled like a man who had just won a prize. They didn't come back to me right away. Instead, they walked to Luke's table, where he introduced her to his group, casually, like they were old friends. She laughed again. Then, finally, she returned. She leaned down, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "I'm heading to the restroom. I'll be right back. Love you." It was wrong. The words, the delivery, the pause before she said, "I love you." It wasn't affection. It was a diversion, a tactic, like she was trying to soften something, ease her own guilt before walking away. And in that moment, I knew. She wasn't going to the restroom. She was going somewhere else. I stood up. I didn't even realize I'd pushed my chair back until it scraped loudly against the floor. My heart was hammering. My hands were already curled into fists, but I forced myself to stay calm, composed. I couldn't confront her without knowing what I was walking into. But just as I took my first step toward the back hallway, they stood. Luke, his 2 friends, tall, sharp-suited, and smug. They stepped away from their table and casually blocked the corridor, right where she'd gone. The same men who had been laughing with him just minutes earlier. And now, they were between me and my wife. I looked each of them in the eye. They didn't say a word, but their message was clear. Turn around. You're not going back there. My blood boiled. The room suddenly felt too warm. I wasn't sure what made me angrier, the idea of my wife sneaking off with another man, or the audacity of these strangers thinking they could decide where I could or couldn't go. They had no idea who I was, what I did, what I was capable of. I smiled, just enough for them to see it. Because in that moment, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't going to end the way they thought. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't push. I just kept walking, slow, steady, toward the hallway that led to the restrooms and, beyond that, the rear exit. The 3 men stepped forward in unison. Luke's entourage, his boys, his backup. One of them, a tall guy with slicked back hair and a smug grin, held up a hand like he was stopping traffic. "Where you headed, boss?" I looked him dead in the eyes. "Out of my way." He didn't flinch. The other two flanked him, forming a human wall, not aggressive, not overtly hostile, but with just enough presence to let me know they weren't planning to let me pass without a scene. It was almost comical. They had no idea what they were dealing with. I've been in boardrooms with men who controlled billions. I've faced down executives who threatened to destroy livelihoods, communities, even countries, just to protect their own power. I've dismantled empires with a few meetings, exposed corruption buried under years of lies, walked into offices where everyone hated me, and walked out with respect, fear, or both. These guys, they were amateurs. Muscle with tailored suits and overpriced cologne. I took a single step forward, close enough for the smug one to feel my breath. "You want to do this?" I asked calmly. He hesitated, just for a second. It was enough. In that pause, he realized I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't afraid of them. I wasn't posturing. I was a man who had nothing left to lose, and men like that are dangerous. He stepped aside. The other two followed. Smart choice. I walked past them without another word, the hallway stretching out in front of me like a tunnel of tension. My footsteps echoed against the tile floor. The music from the party faded behind me. All I could hear now was the pounding of my own heartbeat and the low hum of a question that had no easy answer. What if I'm already too late? I reached the corridor just in time to see her, Elena, disappearing through the back door. "Elena," I called out, sharper than I intended. She paused, turned, and for the first time that night, I saw something I hadn't expected. Irritation. She didn't look guilty. She didn't look caught. She looked annoyed. "What are you doing here?" she asked, like I was the one acting suspicious. I stepped closer. "I should be asking you that." She crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. "I told you. I'm just going to the restroom." "Really?" I said, glancing at the clearly marked sign she had just passed. "You walked past the bathrooms, through a private corridor, and straight to the exit. Must be a fancy restroom out there." Her lips tightened. I stepped even closer. "Tell me the truth, Elena. Where are you going?" For a moment, she said nothing, just looked past me, maybe hoping Luke would come to the rescue. But he didn't. It was just the two of us now. No music, no crowd, no distractions. Finally, she spoke. "I didn't want it to be like this," she whispered. I swallowed the rising anger in my throat. "Like what, Elena?" She looked at the floor. "I was going to call you. Explain everything. After." I laughed, bitter and low. "You were going to text me after sneaking out of a party with another man?" She winced. "It's not like that." "Then explain it to me. Right here. Right now." She took a deep breath, and when her eyes met mine again, I saw the flicker of shame behind them. But it was faint, buried beneath layers of desire and delusion. "I'm going with Luke," she said, her voice trembling but firm. He invited me to his place." Silence. Everything inside me slowed to a crawl. Her words echoed in my head like a gunshot in a tunnel. "To do what?" I asked, though I already knew. She looked away. "To talk. To relax." "Elena," I said coldly, "you don't dress like that to talk with a man like Luke Taylor. You're not going to sip tea and discuss philosophy." She flinched. "It's just one night." "One night," I repeated, the disbelief practically vibrating in my chest. "And tomorrow what? You come home and pretend nothing happened." She hesitated, and that hesitation said more than any answer could. I took a step back, suddenly needing the distance. I could feel the ground shifting under me. Everything I thought I understood, everything we had built, was being reduced to rubble by this moment. "Elena," I said, my voice suddenly hoarse. "You walk out that door with him, we're done. There's no coming back." She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. And for a moment, we just stood there, husband and wife, staring across a widening chasm neither of us could cross. There's a certain kind of silence that settles between two people when everything they thought they understood about each other is suddenly gone. It's not the quiet of peace, or even of uncertainty. It's the stillness of a cliff's edge, right before someone slips. That's where Elena and I stood. Her eyes wouldn't meet mine. She stared past me, jaw clenched, as if looking too long into my face would break the fragile illusion she'd constructed for herself. Maybe she still believed she had control of the narrative, that she could shape this night into something less damning with the right words. But the truth was already out there, dangling between us like a blade. Sharp, undeniable, final. She was planning to go with him. To Luke Taylor's house. A man she barely knew. A man she met tonight. Not because she loved him, she'd made that clear, but because she wanted something. Something I apparently hadn't given her in years. Attention, excitement, validation, maybe all of the above. And in her mind, it was just one night. Just a small betrayal she thought I could absorb. The way I'd absorbed years of disappointment, long hours, and emotional distance. She thought I'd nod, maybe flinch, but ultimately forgive her. Let it slide in the name of love, or commitment, or blind devotion. But she was wrong. As I looked at her, this woman I'd shared a life with, a home, memories, inside jokes, and whispered dreams, I didn't feel anger, at least not at first. I felt a cold, hollow emptiness swelling in my chest, swallowing everything that used to be warm. What stunned me the most wasn't just her willingness to go. It was the casualness of it all. The way she spoke about it like it was an indulgence. Like taking a spontaneous trip or trying something new on a whim. She spoke as if I were expected to understand, expected to be okay with it. In her eyes, I was supposed to accept this betrayal as some sort of temporary detour, a break from our life, after which she'd return to me, satisfied and glowing, as if nothing happened. But marriage doesn't work like that. Love doesn't work like that. You don't hand yourself over to someone else for a night and come back expecting to resume where you left off. And yet, that's exactly what she intended. She had even rehearsed her excuses, I could tell. She was ready to soften the blow with half-truths and sugar-coated reasoning. She would have texted me something vague, something that sounded thoughtful. Maybe even called the next morning and said it was a mistake, claimed she got carried away. Hoped I'd be too hurt to confront her, too stunned to fight back. But I had intercepted her. And now, she had to face me. I think, somewhere in her mind, she thought I'd break down. That I'd beg her not to go. That I'd fall to my knees and plead with her to choose me. Maybe she even wanted that, needed that, some grand show of vulnerability to feed her self-worth. But I didn't give her that. I gave her the truth. And the truth was this. If she walked out that door, we were finished. Not later. Not after a long talk. Not in therapy or with time to heal. Finished. That line, that boundary, was the only thing I had left. If I let it be crossed, then I was no longer her husband. I was just a placeholder. A man too weak to protect his own dignity. I could feel her wavering. The weight of the moment was pressing down on her, on both of us. The fantasy was crumbling around her. The one where she could dip into another life for a night and return to this one untouched. Now, faced with the actual cost, she hesitated. But I saw something in her eyes that made my stomach turn. It wasn't love. It was regret. Not for what she'd done, but for getting caught. She hadn't stopped herself. I had stopped her. And that meant everything. I wondered how far it would have gone if I hadn't followed. How easily she would have slipped into the dark with him, leaving me to toast a friend's birthday while she gave herself to a stranger behind closed doors. I pictured her in his car, laughing at something stupid he said, feeling wanted, desired, high on adrenaline and attention, while I sat alone, clueless. That image burned in my mind like a brand. She'd been ready to go. Even now, I wasn't sure if she'd stay because she wanted to, or because I'd cornered her. And that was its own kind of heartbreak. I stood there, staring at the woman I thought I knew, realizing I'd never really seen her until tonight. And now I wasn't sure I ever wanted to again. She didn't say a word, just stood there in that dim hallway, her arms crossed tight across her chest like she was bracing for a storm. Except the storm was me. Or maybe it was her conscience. Hard to tell. I stared at her, waiting, hoping, on some pathetic level, that she'd do the right thing, that she'd take a breath, blink away the fog of fantasy, and walk back into that dining room with me, that she'd grab my hand and whisper, "Let's go home." But that moment never came. Instead, what came was silence. And the longer it lasted, the more I understood the truth. She wasn't choosing me. She was choosing him. I could see it in her posture, tense, conflicted, but leaning toward the door. Her body language said everything her mouth was too cowardly to admit. And I realized then that this wasn't a mistake she had stumbled into. This wasn't some fluke or moment of weakness. It was a choice. Calculated. Deliberate. She'd considered it. Waited. And in the end, the scale tipped toward him. I stepped back, the space between us now feeling cavernous. "Elena," I said, my voice low but steady. "This isn't just about tonight. This isn't just about Luke. She flinched when I said his name. Good. Let it sting. This is about us, I continued. About trust. About what we've spent over a decade building. You walk through that door, and you're not just going to someone else's bed. You're tearing this entire thing down. Still, she said nothing. Her jaw clenched tighter, like she was trying to swallow guilt that wouldn't go down. I gave her the final blow. You leave with him, we're done. No second chances. No quiet forgiveness. No patching this up 6 months from now in some therapist's office. She looked up at me, her eyes glassy, but not with tears. No, it wasn't sadness. It was panic. Not because she was losing me, but because she hadn't expected me to mean it. She thought I'd fold. That I'd be so desperate to keep her that I'd let her go have her night with Luke and welcome her back like a loyal dog. That I'd tell myself it was just one night. A moment of weakness, a harmless indulgence. But what she didn't understand, what she never understood, is that respect is the only currency in a marriage. And she had just gone bankrupt. You're my wife, I said, the words tasting foreign on my tongue. But if you go, you won't be anymore. Not to me. That finally cracked her. I didn't plan for this, she whispered. It just happened. No, I snapped. Things don't just happen. You let them. You made 100 small choices that led to this exact moment. And now you don't get to pretend you're the victim. Her eyes filled now, truly filled, tears running down her cheeks. Please don't make this harder than it already is, she said. I laughed. Cold. Bitter. I'm not making this hard. You are. And then it hit me, the cruel irony of it all. The woman who once promised to stand beside me through anything now stood across from me, asking me to understand her betrayal, to support it, to love her enough to let her go to another man. I couldn't believe it. She had rewritten the rules of our relationship in her mind, recast herself as the heroine in some twisted romantic drama, where the husband is the wise, noble figure who steps aside so she can pursue what she needs. As if my role now was to quietly suffer in the background while she chased excitement. I shook my head, disgusted. Go then, I said, if that's really what you want. But know this, once you step through that door, you don't get to come back. She took a step toward the exit. Stopped. Look back at me. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said. But you did, I replied. And you were willing to. That's what broke me more than anything. She knew this would destroy me. And she was still willing to try. She looked at the exit one last time. Her fingers trembled at her side. She didn't move. And in that moment, that awful, heavy moment, I realized something else. Even if she stayed, even if she turned back and fell into my arms right now, I would never look at her the same again. I don't know how long we stood there in that corridor, suspended between two futures, one where she left with him, and one where she turned back to me, but either way, something had already died between us. She hadn't crossed the line, not physically, not yet, but emotionally. She had sprinted across it. And still, she hesitated. That, somehow, was worse than any answer she could have given. Not the betrayal itself, but the internal tug-of-war I could see playing out on her face. She was trying to decide if I was still worth it. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to demand she remember everything we'd been through. The years, the sacrifices, the small routines that build a life. But I knew it wouldn't matter. Because when someone has to think about whether or not to stay, they're already halfway gone. She wiped her face, took a shaky breath, and finally spoke. I'm sorry, she whispered. I wasn't going to tell you like this. A bitter laugh escaped me. Oh, how were you planning to do it? A text after you were already in his bed. She winced, but didn't deny it. That told me everything. Elena, I said, pulling a folded piece of paper from my jacket pocket. You weren't just playing with fire. You were about to burn down everything we've built. I handed her the note. The one the server had slipped me earlier in the evening. She took it with trembling hands and read it. Slowly, carefully, then looked up at me, pale as ash. Where did you get this? The waiter, I replied. Apparently, Luke has a reputation. You're not the first married woman he's gone after. Probably not even the first this month. She read the note again. Her hands shook. The truth began to set in, the fantasy unraveling. It hadn't been about her. Not really. It was about the chase. The game. She was just this week's thrill. I watched her face fall as it all sank in. That she'd been targeted, flattered, pulled into his orbit like dozens before her. And she almost gave herself away for it. Almost threw away 12 years of marriage to be another notch on his belt. The humiliation hit her like a truck. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Was I really that easy to manipulate?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She turned, stumbled down the hall, and pushed into the restroom. I heard the door slam behind her, then the unmistakable sound of retching. She was vomiting. Good, I thought. Let her feel sick. Let her body reject what her mind had so easily accepted. I stood there, my hands in my pockets, heart still pounding. The fury had cooled slightly, replaced by something colder: disappointment, disillusionment, maybe even pity. When she finally came out, her face was blotchy and wet, her hair disheveled. She looked like someone who had been through a war, and maybe, in a way, she had. She saw me and ran straight into my arms, sobbing. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. "Please, please forgive me. I didn't know. I didn't see it. I was so stupid." I held her, but I didn't say anything, because I wasn't sure what I believed anymore. She clung to me like I was her anchor in a storm, but I couldn't tell if it was love or guilt. "Say something," she begged. "Please." I pulled back just enough to look her in the eyes. "You weren't just about to cheat on me," I said quietly. "You were about to leave me." She shook her head violently. No, it wasn't like that. I wasn't going to stay with him. It was just a moment, a mistake. It didn't mean anything." "That's the problem," I said. "It meant nothing to you, but it would have meant everything to me." Her face crumpled. "I didn't sleep with him. I didn't go. Doesn't that count for something?" "Only because I caught you in time," I replied. "If I hadn't come down that hallway when I did, where would you be right now?" She didn't answer, because we both knew. I don't know what hurt more, the betrayal, or the fact that I had to be the one to stop it. Even now, even standing there with her crying in my arms, I felt it. The bond between us had been severed. Not completely, not yet, but the cut was deep, and some things, once broken, never heal the same. I didn't know what would come next. I didn't know if we'd make it, but I knew this. We'd never go back to the way things were. We didn't go back to the table. After what had just happened in that hallway, the thought of returning to a room full of smiling faces, cake, and small talk made my skin crawl. I didn't want to pretend. I couldn't. Not anymore. Elena clutched my arm as we walked through the corridor, but I could feel the tension in her grip. It wasn't affection, it was fear. Fear of what I was thinking. Fear of what I might do. Or worse, fear that I might do nothing at all. Outside, the air was sharp and cool, slicing through the humid tension that still lingered between us. The street buzzed with energy, people laughing, cars pulling up, the world continuing as if my life hadn't just been split down the middle. I handed the valet our ticket, and we waited. But we weren't alone. The SUV came fast, too fast, tires screeching slightly as it swung into view and slammed to a stop in front of the restaurant. The tinted passenger window rolled down, and there he was, Luke Taylor, the man who nearly ruined everything. He leaned out the window, sunglasses still on despite the night, and flashed that same smug grin that had probably seduced a dozen women before Elena. And now, right in front of me, he had the audacity to speak. "Come on, Elena," he called out casually, like he was inviting her to coffee. "You said you wanted this. Let's go." She froze. Every muscle in her body tightened. She didn't move, didn't breathe, just stared at him, like she couldn't believe he was actually here, like this, again. But I could. Of course he was here. Predators don't like being denied. They don't just slink off into the night when they lose. They circle back, test the cage, see if the gate's still open. I stepped forward, shielding her with my body. "She's not going with you," I said flatly. Luke laughed. "I wasn't talking to you, old man." That did it. The rage I'd been holding back all night surged. I moved closer to the SUV, ready to drag him out through the window if I had to. But before I could even open my mouth again, he did something far worse than taunting. He got out. He opened the driver's side door and stepped out onto the sidewalk. And in his hand was a gun. Everything around me slowed. The crowd nearby gasped. People backed away. The air shifted. What had been a tense standoff turned instantly dangerous. Elena screamed behind me. Luke didn't raise the weapon, not yet. He just held it low, by his side, like it was nothing more than a conversation starter. "You took something from me," he growled. "I don't like losing." My heart pounded. I stepped back slightly, lifting my hands, palms out, a non-threatening gesture. But inside, my mind was calculating every angle, every movement. What he didn't know was that I was armed too. Legally. Tucked inside my jacket, under my arm, sat a compact pistol, one I'd carried for years but never once used outside the range. I wasn't a hero, not a fighter, but I knew how to survive. Still, I didn't draw. Not yet. I watched him, listened to his breathing, saw the twitch in his jaw, the madness in his eyes. This wasn't a bluff. Luke Taylor was unraveling. He was seconds away from doing something irreversible, but I wasn't the one who stopped him. 3 shots rang out from behind me. Fast, controlled, precise. Luke jerked, once, twice, then stumbled backward, a 3rd shot hitting him square in the chest. He collapsed onto the sidewalk with a grunt, the gun clattering beside him. I turned around, heart racing, trying to find the source of the gunfire. And there she was, a woman in civilian clothes, her hands still gripping the pistol, now lowered. Her expression was calm, focused. "Off-duty, officer," she said quickly, flashing a badge. I had to act. "He was going to shoot you." I nodded, still trying to catch my breath. Luke lay on the ground, groaning in pain, blood spreading fast across his shirt. The paramedics were called. People gathered. The crowd buzzed with chaos. Questions. Fear. Whispers. But I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at him. This man, this walking wrecking ball of ego and charm, who had tried to steal my wife, humiliate me, threaten me, and now die in front of me. And part of me felt nothing. Not anger. Not satisfaction. Not even pity. Just emptiness. Because the truth was, Luke Taylor hadn't broken my marriage. He had only exposed the cracks that were already there. The gunfire had stopped him. But it was Elena's silence, her hesitation, her almost, that had truly done the damage. It was nearly midnight when the police finally allowed us to leave. The street was cordoned off with yellow tape. Luke Taylor's body had been taken away. The crowd had mostly dispersed, replaced by flashing red and blue lights, uniforms, and the dull hum of a city coming down from chaos. Elena and I had given our statements, first to the patrol officers, then to detectives, and finally to someone from the district attorney's office. I told them everything I knew, the note, the confrontation, the gun, the officer's actions. But emotionally, I said very little. What could I say? That my wife nearly left me for a man she barely knew? That I watched her consider it, weigh it in her mind like a coin flip? That the bullet didn't just take Luke down, it shattered what little was left of my trust in her? No, that wasn't something I could explain in a police report. We got into the car in silence. I drove. Elena sat beside me, hands folded tight in her lap, eyes fixed on the dashboard like she was afraid to even glance in my direction. The hum of the engine was the only sound between us, but the silence was deafening. Then, finally, she spoke. Are you glad it wasn't you?" I turned to her, confused. "What?" "Luke," she said softly. "Are you glad you didn't pull the trigger? That the officer did?" I didn't answer right away. I kept my eyes on the road. The headlights cut through the night, illuminating a path forward I wasn't sure I wanted to follow. "Yes," I said eventually. "I'm glad." But that wasn't the whole truth. Because while I hadn't been the one to fire the shots, a part of me had wanted to. Not out of revenge, not out of rage, but because I had wanted to be the one to end it, to take back control, to finish the story the way I wanted it told. And that part of me was still awake, still burning. She nodded, slowly, as if she sensed what I wasn't saying. "I'm sorry," she whispered again. I didn't respond, because her apologies no longer felt like healing. They felt like hollow attempts to rewind time. But time doesn't rewind. It only moves forward. And the road ahead felt cold, unfamiliar. We drove for another few miles in silence, the weight of everything pressing in from all sides. Then I broke it. "Tell me something," I said, keeping my voice level. "Would you have gone through with it?" She didn't answer. That was answer enough. But I waited. I needed to hear it from her mouth. I needed the truth, even if it cut deeper than I was ready for. After what felt like an eternity, she finally said, "Yes." The word was quiet, almost inaudible, but it hit like a hammer to the chest. "I was going to go with him," she admitted. "Spend the night." I told myself it would just be physical, just one time, that it didn't mean anything. I clenched the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. But it would have meant everything, I said, echoing my own words from earlier. "To me." She nodded again, tears now streaking down her cheeks. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I can't believe how close I came to losing you." You didn't almost lose me, Elena, I said. You did lose me. Maybe not in the legal sense, but in the ways that count. I shook my head. You crossed a line. Even if your body didn't, your heart did. That's not something I can unsee. She sobbed quietly beside me, but I didn't reach for her. Not this time. I didn't have the strength to comfort her pain while still carrying my own. A few more minutes passed before she said, I won't let another man near me again, I swear. I learned my lesson. I'll never betray you like that again. I looked at her, and in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I didn't believe her. Not because I thought she was lying, but because I saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there before tonight. A crack. An opening. Luke hadn't just tempted her. He'd awakened something in her. A hunger. A curiosity. A need to feel desirable again. Noticed again. Wanted again. I had no doubt she hated what happened. But I wasn't sure she hated it for the right reasons. She hated the consequences. But had she hated the feeling? That was the question that haunted me as we pulled into our driveway. I shut off the engine. Neither of us moved. Then I said, without looking at her, even if we stay together, I'll never trust you the same way again. She cried harder. I closed my eyes. And in that quiet, painful moment, we both realized something inside us had died tonight. And neither of us knew if it could ever be revived. We didn't speak as we stepped inside the house. The door clicked shut behind us with a dull finality, like the lid closing on a coffin. Everything looked the same. The photos on the wall, the scent of home lingering in the air, but nothing felt the same. Elena moved toward the stairs, slow and hesitant, but I stayed in the foyer, rooted to the floor. I couldn't bring myself to go up with her. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Then I asked the question, the one that had been clawing at the back of my mind since we left the scene. Do you regret it? She stopped mid-step. Didn't turn around. What do you mean? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. You know what I mean, I replied. Do you regret not going with him? Spending the night? Living out your little fantasy? The words were cruel, yes. But I wasn't interested in sparing her feelings anymore. I wanted honesty, raw and unfiltered. She turned then, slowly. Her face was pale, eyes rimmed red from crying. But it wasn't the tears that caught my attention. It was the pause. Too long. Too careful. And when she finally answered, of course not, Daniel. Don't be ridiculous. It came too fast, too rehearsed. The kind of line someone wants to believe they mean. But I knew her too well. I saw it in the way her lips pressed tightly together, the way her eyes darted, avoiding mine. That was the look of someone not mourning a sin, but mourning a missed thrill. And I realized, in that moment, I wasn't just betrayed. I was replaced. Not by Luke, not permanently, but by the idea of someone else. Someone who made her feel young again, desired, excited. Someone who didn't remind her of the years that had passed or the responsibilities we carried. He hadn't stolen her. She'd offered herself. And now, even as she tried to convince me, or herself, that she regretted nothing, I saw the truth in her silence. She missed what could have been. And that was worse than any lie she could have told. I walked past her, up the stairs, into the bedroom. Changed clothes. Washed my face. I needed a moment alone. A moment to think. But even in the privacy of my own mind, peace was impossible. Because the question remained, what now? We could go through the motions. Play the part of a married couple trying to heal. Go to therapy. Cook dinner. Sleep under the same roof. Smile at the neighbors. But it would all be theater. Because beneath it all, I no longer saw her as the woman who vowed to stand by me. I saw her as the woman who nearly walked away for one night of pleasure. And she knew it too. That's the thing no one tells you about betrayal. It doesn't always end in shouting, broken dishes, or slammed doors. Sometimes, it ends with long silences and quiet realizations. That night, as we lay in bed, backs turned, breath shallow, I felt her shift closer. Her hand brushed my arm, hesitant. I didn't pull away, but I didn't respond either, because my heart wasn't ready, and I don't know if it ever will be. Her voice, soft and trembling, broke the silence. Do you think we'll be okay? I stared at the ceiling, watching the shadows shift in the moonlight. I don't know, I said. I really don't. She didn't press further. Because we both understood, this wasn't something an apology could fix. It wasn't a wound that time would simply close. It was a fracture at the core, a crack running through the foundation. And even if we managed to patch it, we'd always know it was there. waiting to split wide open again the moment pressure returned. In the weeks that followed, we tried. We made the effort, had long conversations, even sought counseling. But something had changed in both of us. In me, a part had gone numb. The part that trusted, that gave freely, that believed in the forever we once promised each other. In her, a door had been opened, one that couldn't be closed. A door to possibility, temptation, escape. She didn't walk through it that night, but she found it. And once you find it, you always know where it is. That's what scared me the most. Because love, real love, doesn't just die with betrayal. It dies with doubt. And from that night on, every time she looked at me, touched me, whispered, "I love you," all I could wonder was, is she still thinking about what she almost had? And that question, that haunting question, would be the one that stayed forever. Looking back on that night, on everything that nearly happened and everything that did, I've come to realize that betrayal doesn't always begin with action. Sometimes it starts with neglect, with silence, with the slow unraveling of connection. We didn't lose each other in a single moment. We lost each other in the spaces between unspoken words, in the busy days, the tired nights, the assumption that love would simply maintain itself. If there's anything I've learned, anything I wish I could pass on, it's this. Guard your relationship like it matters. Not just on anniversaries or during arguments, but in the everyday. Talk, touch, ask, listen. Don't wait until someone else offers what you've forgotten to give. Because by the time temptation arrives, the distance may already be too wide to close. And if you're lucky enough to share your life with someone who still chooses you every day, then choose them back. Fiercely, intentionally. Love fades only when we stop feeding it. And if my story teaches anything, it's this. Don't let the first sign of trouble be the last chance to fix it. Because once the cracks show, sometimes they never go away.